Hey everybody, it's good to see y'all back again. We're still rolling on ahead with the try build, that's right. I swear we're all gluttons for punishment, I don't know. So, yeah, last time we got all of the block honing done, so as long as they're still gritty, let's just make more mess. Let's get all of the nasty work done and knocked out of the way, and then we'll just clean all of these once. So, kind of the easiest way to do it. We need to get into the valves, so I'm going to need to retouch the seats on all 6 cylinders, all 3 blocks, and once we are done with that, we will set valves up to said seats. And I spent most of the day yesterday deciding which valves and springs and keepers and retainers and tappets and everything else was going to go with each engine. So we'll start with this one here. We're remaining old school with this old devil block here. So to go with our first generation plug pistons, I've got some new old stock intake valves, yeah, from the Pac-Man era. We've got new old stock exhaust valves from way back. What I like is, look at that, $1.45. Can you imagine? Of course, that was back in the day where you probably had to work until lunch break to make $3 anyway, so yeah, it all shakes out. Anyway, I've also got some new old stock valve guides already paired with the best springs and retainers and keepers that I had, also the best set of tappets that I had. So that's the way we're going with this one. These valves and tappets and everything are actually out of 1113's original block. Yeah, I brought it out of storage. It's, yeah, because that happened. It's still hard to look at. This side too, heaved out all the way into that coolant port. That piece just about blasted totally out the side. All those valves and everything were in really good shape. Actually, this whole block was in really good shape. And I mean, look at the seats. You can still see the circular grinding marks from when they refreshed them. And looking at the faces of the valves, like this intake valve, we'll get in the light just right. They maybe lapped it in slightly after the grind, but it never even really seated. This thing had no runtime on it after rebuild before it froze and exploded. I'm distracted. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to probably just lightly retouch 1113's valves and then just match them all to this block. All that stuff's good there. These valves and keepers and springs and tappets and everything were original to this block. These were in excellent shape as well. They were ran long enough to seat, so we have just a little bit of wear to take care of there. But we have good margins yet. They're by no means thin. We can actually remove a little bit of material, refresh all that, and then go from there. So, all right, we're off on tangent mode here. That's got me thinking. This is, you know, the earliest of the first gen old devil blocks, 4B666. And the reason you can tell just at a glance is you have this raised rib that goes down here. It didn't take long before they did away with that. If you go by the numeral code on this, this is a September of 38 casting date. And this old devil block is a June of 41, and you can see it's flat. They'd already done away with it. So that's how you know, I'm trying to train you guys to look at this stuff enough to be able to just spot something like that, and the brain computations just go, and you're like, yep, I don't even need to look at the casting code to know how old that block is. But it's a shame. This one has a good main bearing bore. It has good cam journals, it has good tappet bores, it has good cylinder bores, it has good valve seats. It's just, it has good everything. This is like, oh my god, this is what you just want to rebuild right here. And we're by no means getting rid of it. There's, if we're lucky, we'll see a day where this is actually a score and somebody's like, oh man, all I got to do is put like some water jacket pieces back. Sure, I'll take it all day long. So yeah, it is repairable, but still cost prohibitive when I have a shed full of these other ones just sitting around waiting to be used. So let's just start with dressing the valve faces. These are 45-degree seats, so I've got the chuck set accordingly. Center that in there. I've freshly dressed the face of the stones. We're ready to go, and we're just taking the wear out. We're not taking off any more material than we absolutely have to, just until it cleans up. Yeah, that's looking good. Yep. And repeat. Okay, everybody, first step of the process is complete. We've got all the valves refaced. I even checked those new old stockers to make sure they were on point. Off camera, I brought out the cams for each one of these engines because part of this process is also setting the valve lash. We're going to have those present in order to do that. Another thing I should mention, the intake valves and exhaust valves on these starting engines look the same, but they are in fact very, very different. Exhaust valves are made to cope with higher heat. Intake valves are not. So you could put an exhaust valve in an intake spot and it'll work just fine, but you can't put an intake valve in an exhaust valve spot, otherwise it'll burn out. Cat's pretty good about marking them. This one, you can see right off the end of my thumb, we have hopefully you can see IN for intake, and this one should be, yep, off the end of my thumb, EX for exhaust. So that's how you tell them apart. And an easy way to remember where to put them on these starting engines, the valves that are on the flywheel side are always intake, and then the valves that are on the gear train side are always exhaust. Pretty easy to remember. So now we can refresh the seats. To do that, I broke into the seat grinder kit. I've pre-selected the mandrel that I want, and I've also loaded the 45-degree stellite stone onto the driver. We're not going to bring the motor with us. Shocking, I know. We'll explain in a minute. And we're only bringing the one stone. I usually do at least a 3-angle seat. On all these old engines, these are a bit different. So that's all you need. I'm going to start with the exhaust valve on this cylinder. So take the guide and the stop clip. And just another indicator as to how crude these engines are. Those valve guides are just a slip fit. They're not even press fit. So tolerances here are just not that critical, because even under the best of circumstances, that valve's floating around a little bit. It's just the way they're made. And looking at the seat areas, the way they cut these valve recesses in, the seat area is raised from everything else around it already. So I don't remove any more material from these than I absolutely have to. They have a very finely machined inside diameter, and with them being raised above the surrounding material, the surrounding areas, they also have a pretty consistent outside diameter to them. So if you machine these down to the point where they become even with the rest of the recess right there, your next step is to have that whole area cut out and have a new seat pressed in. So we don't get too carried away with removing material. That's why I'm just going to be turning on that driver by hand. I don't even want to put the motor on it because we just need to just refresh the surfaces and they're going to be all right. And, you know, I just do the single angle seat because our margins are already predefined, and I've found it's best not to try and narrow these seats up. Leave them full width on the valve even from the beginning. These are going to run and they're going to operate just fine. So the mandrel goes in just until it tightens on the taper. Hear that? Yeah, these things are not, they're not tight by any means, even when they're brand new. So, and freshly dressed stone. I redressed the stone between each and every seat because we're only doing a single angle on here. I want to get it right the first time, and I don't want to have to go back and re-true. You're just peeling out more material you don't have to be. So, but no, with these stellite stones, even by hand like this with mild pressure, they cut pretty fast. Look at the black ring. That's all the material that's transferred onto there. We're already starting to shine up. So only if these areas are really pitted, like there's been a lot of water in there. Rarely have I ever had to do like a 3-angle seat just to true the margins on the inside and the outside once again. Most times, this is just all I do. So remember, I'm not telling you this is how you're supposed to do it. This is just me telling you how I do it. Okay, that seat's looking pretty good all the way around at this point. Get some of that excess grit off of there and take the valve I'm going to use. Just for an initial check, I put 4 chalk lines around the perimeter of the face. That will illustrate a witness pattern. I'm just spinning it on the seat, and this is just kind of to get an idea where we're contacting. So have a quick look, and already it's looking pretty darn good just by the witness marks from, you can see the interruptions in the chalk lines. That's a good one. That's a good one. You can kind of already see like how wide the seat is going to be and where it's located. We're getting out towards the outside of the face, so that's good for heat dissipation. So I'm already happy enough with how the seat looks to move on to the next step. Now normally when I grind seats, and mainly 3-angle seats, I don't bother lapping the valves in because all of your angles are already matched. But with these, I'm leaving them nice and wide right from the start, so we're actually going to lap the valve in as well. If we did a 3-angle seat and we started out purposely with a narrower contact pattern so it can wear and mushroom in, I definitely wouldn't worry about lapping valves. But we're all about conserving material right here. I want to start out full width. It just makes everything last that much longer. So it's kind of partly conservation mode. Another part, just acknowledging what we're working with here. These don't need anything any fancier than what I'm doing right now. So like I said, I'm not telling you this is how you have to do it. Again, it's just how I do it. So let's check our seal. Put a little pressure on it. Yeah, see, it's pushing back a little bit. We get a pop when it releases. That's another indicator it's got a pretty good seal just with the grinding compound on it. Get the grit off, and we can check our seal. You can see exactly where the grinding compound was. Good, consistent width all the way around. We're leaving it right there. That valve and that seat are set. So now that we have this valve set to this seat, that's its home from here on out. I think at this point, we're just going to keep walking our way through the process on into checking valve lash as long as we have this first one set up to the seat. So for that, I need to have the camshaft installed. There we are. Face the cam lobe away from that valve, and we'll put the tappet in. These are the 1113 Pony Originals here. You can still see the stone marks on the valve end of that tappet from when it was reconditioned the last time. Normally I would retouch these because they can wear a divot in there from pushing on the valve. These are still like, well, the last guy did all the work for me. So to get that in there, we need to remove that valve guide once again. So tappet goes all the way up to the bore, tight against the cam. We'll assemble the guide to the valve. Spring and retainer go on the end. Hopefully we're getting all this in frame here. We'll put it in the valve spring compressor and just, all right, poke that up so we can get the locks on it. Keepers, whatever you want to call them. Usually you don't even need grease for these things either because this stuff is also easy to reach right here. So there we are. Relieve the tension. There's our assembled unit. Slide that in from the outside. And to get the guide the last little bit of the way, you go down through the port with a screwdriver and just compress that valve spring enough to get the retaining lock on. There we go. Valve is installed. To check clearance now, we put a feeler gauge between the back end of that tappet and the back side of the cam lobe. And we're looking for 7 to 10 thousandths cold on all these valves, both intake and exhaust. So a little bit of clearance there, but I could tell by the click it was not going to be enough. And sure enough, only a 3 thousandths blade goes in there. So we need to grind a valve stem. To do that, we have to get the valve back out. That's why I did put any grease or oil on this first time, because until you know where your clearances are, you might be taking all this back apart. Okay, it's a few minutes later, we're all put back together again. I actually ended up doing the initial grind. You want to sneak up on these. I took a few thousandths off, put this all together, checked it. That brought us just about up to 7. I like to hit right more mid-range on these valves, so I took it apart, hit it one more time, and we'll see where we are now. We should be getting pretty close. Seat that where it wants to be, and we'll start out with an 8 thousandths blade and just see. Yeah, a little bit loose. Peel it out and go to a 9. Yeah, that's 9 is a good drag, so that's hitting it right in the middle of the spec. Really happy with that. That's exactly where I want to be. So if we would have been too loose, and you know, being too tight is easy, you can always take a little off the stem or off the tappet, gives you some more clearance. But if we were too loose, really what you have to do at that point then is either start replacing tappets, valves, or both. Something with some more material is going to take up some more of that slack. So I'll just give you guys a real world scenario here, example. Back when I did my first starting engine, my grandpa's old 5J, I had like no money, no spare parts, and just running what I had. These things were like 15 thousandths clearance. And to be honest with you, that engine started and ran just as well as any that I renewed back to 100% new specs. So these are, like I said, pretty forgiving. So yeah, this was the perfect example right here, because we lapped the valve and touched the seat and had to grind the stem and create clearance and all that stuff. We just need to do this 11 more times now between the other engines. So this is quite time consuming. I'll probably be back tomorrow. See you all then. Well, welcome back everybody. As promised, it is the next day, and we're just finishing up final valve, getting the assembly lube on the stem and inside the guide and everything. This is always the last step on these, because until I know that everything is set where it needs to be, I leave them dry, because if I have to take the spring and the guide and everything back off to grind a stem, I don't want to have oil and grease all over everything. It just all stays cleaner, nicer if I leave them all dry until we've finished with all of that. So, all right, final one, clip in place, and he can join the others. So that is a nice job to have behind me. It was, well, 3 days. Day 1 was clean up and inspection of all this stuff. Day 2 was about the first half of facing valves, grinding seats, lapping valves, setting lash, and then we finished the other half today. I had one scoundrel in the mix, one of the 1113 Pony Originals. This one had been ground really short on the stem at one point, and it didn't matter where I tried to put it. It's an intake valve. I had like 25 thousandths plus lash, because the stem had just had so much ground away. That old 1113 block must have had a low seat or something, because all the tappets measured the same. We didn't have a tall tappet that caused them to have to grind too much off the stem. But I'm going to keep him. He might find a home yet if I have another block with a rather low seat. This is the one that I had to replace him with here. Another intake from my my used parts stash, and it faced up and lapped in really well. Still has good margins on it. So ended up with a pretty decent set after all. It is kind of nice looking at all these pieces knowing they've all got a home. So that's a lot of sizing and fitting work right there. And I can tell you one thing for sure. I would never have been able to be the starting engine putter together on the assembly line for Cat back in the day. Of course, having to recondition all the components, my average is one starting engine per day. I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have cut it. But yeah, if you start with shiny new parts, I'm sure it went a lot quicker. And where do we go from here? That's the next question. Looking at what we've got, well, this middle engine is ready to have the crankshaft fitted. And yeah, it's the only one that's got the good bearing bore. This one's going to need a spun bore replaced. This one's going completely off the rails. I got some wild ideas we're going to do with this. I'm telling you right now, just advance warning. But I think I'm going to do these 3 crankshaft installs, each with their own episode. So this is going to be the correct, right, and proper one that we just put together like it was back in the day and nothing was wrong. This is going to be a spun bearing bore repair. And like I said, we're going to mix 1.21 gigawatts with 88 miles an hour and just kind of see what might happen, right? So, okay, everybody. Yeah, I'm so glad to have those valves behind me. I'm just tired of looking at the darn things. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the watch minutes. Thanks for the channel support. It's all much appreciated. And yeah, we're going to see if we can get some actual assembly done next time, fitting that crankshaft in that first block. So exciting times when you can actually see something start to happen. You can actually see some progress. So until next time.